as well. Hey everyone, this is OotiniCast episode 378 being recorded on the last day of 2019, 12/31/2019. And we're going to get going here in just a second. Right now we're just getting everything prepared. I think though that we're pretty close to being prepared now. So Doc is with me and we're going to be talking about Rise of Skywalker and the Mandalorian. I'm catching a little feedback from you, I think, there, Doc. I'm not sure what it was there. No, I can definitely hear feedback. Is it showing on Audacity?
No.
Okay, let me turn down my headset. Try talking again. Talk, please.
Testing.
Okay. Test. Okay, I'm not hearing it much anymore, so hopefully that...
My headset might have been turned up a bit too high. I just lowered it.
Perfect. And I just lowered mine so that we can, for the same kind of reason, in case it goes the other way. All right, then. Let me go ahead and tweet this out, and then we will get going on the actual show. Okay. What was that?
Oh, that was you, Chill.
Why?
Chillception.
Are you... Oh, that's right. And I need to get the chat going as well. So let me do that before we get the actual show going, too. All right. Sweet. All right. So let me get... Get the Twitch chat going. Let's see. I just have to adjust this. I don't have any really good way to do it otherwise. Okay, I think I'm good to go. Sweet. Actually, let me redo this so that it's not maximized. That's just a pain in the butt. Okay. So I can switch between them a little easier. Okay, good. I'm gonna have a little water and then we'll get going on the show. Hi, and welcome to the OotiniCast. We have been every voice you have ever heard inside your head. This is episode 378 being recorded on Tuesday, December 31st, 2019. I'm your host, Jill, and with me is my co-host, Dr SWTOR. Hey, Doc, how you doing?
I'm really appreciating the impersonations, Chill. Nice way to start off our TROS show.
Yes, exactly. This is going to be, later on, it's going to be a spoilerific show. So if you haven't seen Rise of Skywalker yet, you can safely listen for a while, and then we'll give you a heads up when we're going to actually talk about Rise of Skywalker, and it will be with full spoilers because otherwise it's just no fun to talk about. you have to worry about what toes you're stepping on and so forth. So, Doc, how you been and what you been up to in SWTOR this couple weeks?
Well, I'm feeling a lot better, and so for people who maybe were looking for my stream channel to light up and activate, the last couple weeks I did miss about 10 days in December just from being sick, and it really knocked me off my normal schedule. But I got back in. I did try to do a few streams that I normally wouldn't have done just to get a couple more videos up on my channel. So I streamed some flashpoints the other day, and
nice.
I was in as the tank, which is not normal. And the group finder decided to give us Traitor Among the Chiss, which I had never done on Master Mode before. So
nice.
I was I was excited by that because 3 of the 4 people, me and 2 of my raid teammates in my Death Star Troopers team, were making up the group. So I had some confidence in what we were capable of, and we got a healer from the group finder. So major shout out for sticking with us to Loves My Tank. Did a really good job keeping me alive, and we did clear the flashpoint. So then
Nice.
the next day, we started talking about. Actually, I need to update that. One person in our group, Medulla, is not on Death Star Troopers, but I play with him a lot and really enjoy when he's in my group. So that's why I didn't even think.
Yeah, and he's in chat right now.
Yeah. Yeah, hi Medulla. Actually, fun story. Medulla and I had been very focused back when Crisis on Umbara was new on being able to clear that in Master Mode. So there was a really nice symmetry to having him in the group with me when we did Traitor Among the Chiss. And so naturally we started talking about Nathema Conspiracy. And next day or the following day after that, we put a group together where all 4 of us, so not technically group finder, went in and we flattened that flashpoint. So I think that's kind of a 5.0 to 6.0 conversion, or maybe our powers have doubled since last we attempted. Anyway, it went really well. And so then we finished it and we still had time. So we went and did Objective Meridian 2, and we cleared the bonus boss and we cleared the flashpoint without really any exciting event. Other than, it's exciting for the bosses to die, but it wasn't stressful. It was just really cool to take some of what we do in our raids and apply it to the 4-man instances. So that was really fun to do that, and one of the highlights. And also in raiding, my Thursday night team finally cleared the trash boss, which is boss number 2 in Nature of Progress on Duxon. And then we pulled out the last pull magic on the Kephis Rangers, and we got a clear on them too. And if you watch the video, which I put the link in the show notes, you'll have this really fun visual of me getting run over by a train at the end. And the screen goes red.
Oh, that's awesome.
To that. The screen goes red when the train runs over you. It's really awesome and violent. Maybe it turned red because I think the bosses kind of go, and I think that got over my dead tune. So,
oh man,
we got the win. And the funny thing is, the fight is exactly the length of One Winged Angel from Final Fantasy VII Advent Children. I just happened to play the song because we had Last Pull Magic, and I wanted it to sound epic on my stream. Mm-hmm. And the song ended when the fight ended. So that was really cool. Like, you might think I edited it that way, but I really didn't. It was just really nifty, if I can use that word on the podcast. And also, I saw The Rise of Skywalker 2 times. I had my sister and one of my very good friends who's played a lot of SWTOR with me over the years, and actually work friend converted to like lifelong real life friend. They flew from Florida to visit me that week, and we saw the movie twice together.
That's great.
Because it's the last one. It's the Skywalker saga. And I kind of started twisting their arm in June saying, like, how can you see the last episode of the Skywalker saga without Dr. SWTOR? Because they watched me write my dissertation and were with me the whole way. And so Star Wars is a really important part of our friendship and the bonds that we have. So we were able to get that coordinated with the travel. And it was really nice. I think that had actually a positive impact on what I felt during the movie too. So it's really nice, since I'm pretty isolated here in Arizona, to have some of that comfort zone come to me and be part of my Star Wars. So that's it for me, Chill. So I want to have you check in with the chat room, and then how are you doing?
Sounds good. Let's see. So Dekion's here, Japeo, Medulla, Duck Sauce, Marcus is here, Working Class Nerds. That shows up on the list, but I also see that Eric4678 is here, and Codex 125, Bojangles. Hey everyone, how's it going? So yeah, right after the last show, well, we had that. You might remember there was the live stream that the devs had right before our last show, and that was mostly about the fact that there's going to be an Alderaan stronghold, and then they put up the PTS the next day. So right after our show. So I went on the PTS and I investigated that stronghold. It was really interesting. It's a very pretty stronghold, pretty good sized. There's some really wide open like outdoor areas, and then there's a couple of fairly substantial buildings as well. I mean, if you like Alderaan, it's got Alderaan. It's definitely there. The Killik part was sort of interesting because there's this like thing you click on, and when you unlock that area, it actually explodes this wall, and then it reveals the Killik hive that's there behind it. So that's pretty cool. You can go in there and then check things out, and there are hooks in the Killik area as well. There's sort of like a main sort of castle sort of building that's pretty big and has some pretty beautiful like views and so forth. And then you go to this other area, and there's this sort of like it's a couple of like guest room or just living area quarter areas that are over there, as well as sort of like some outdoor plazas with some, again, lovely views of mountains and so forth. I did put in some bug reports, so hopefully those will, they'll take notice of that. The ones that I noted, I have kind of written down. One is that there's like a northern quarters and a western quarters, but they were named wrong. Like the one on the north was named north was on the west, and the one named west was on the north, so that was weird. Also, there was like part of one wall was kind of missing. And one thing that I don't think was a bug, but it was very weird, and I don't know. It's really hard to describe, but if you know anything about the movie The Shining, you'll know that Kubrick purposely made it so that a lot of the rooms are impossible. Like if you like in the opening of the movie, they go through the lobby and then you follow into Mr. Ullman's office, and there's a window with clearly like bright sunlight shining on the window, and there's like some branches kind of showing. But if you look at how you're going into that room, with that dolly shot, then you know that it's impossible. There's like a hallway back there. There's no way that there could be an exterior window there. And the same thing happens in the Alderaan stronghold. So,
oh no.
Yeah, it's very bizarre because and it happens in this northern and western sort of living quarter area. So if you look at, like, if you go into like the western door, I think it's still called northern, at least it was at the time, and you go in, you follow the hallways around, you'll see that there's a window. And if you go back outside, there is a window, but it's not exactly in the same spot. It's too high. It's not the right spot left and right. It's not the right spot up and down. And it's not the right spot forward and back either. And if you go back inside and check it out, you can actually look out this window. It's actually low enough that you can actually look out the window. And it's bizarre because it looks like you're looking out the window from where it looks on the outside, but you're not there. You're not there. It's so bizarre. It's very
visited
creepy.
That stronghold with you, and I went outside and you were inside, would you be able to see me, or is your theory that you're looking at a different outside because that outside is not actually where the window is looking?
I'm not sure how they do it. We would have to test that. Definitely when you're looking out, it's rendering something that's outdoors, but I don't know how they do it when it's not matching, the wall. So it's not just like a window should just be like this clear thing that you can kind of look through and it doesn't affect anything, but clearly that's not what's happening here. And there's one on the other wall as well, and it also does the same thing. So if you go in the north door, which is considered the western or at least it was named the Western, whatever complex or whatever. And then you follow the halls around, and then you look at where you end up. Again, you're not at the right spot. Up, down, left, right, or forward and back. It's very bizarre. And it's a little creepy once you notice it too. It's like it feels very Shining-ish, but it was interesting too. Again, I enjoyed the process, and it's actually very beautiful. So they did a great job. The multicolor window in the main castle is really lovely, and shines the colored light on the floor and everything. There's some really nice stuff. There's sort of like a throne roomish looking thing with a lovely waterfall effect behind it. Really, really nice. So I highly anticipate that that's going to be a very popular stronghold for people to get. It makes sense. I mean, ever since strongholds became a thing and they started asking, hey, well, where would you like the next one to be opened? Alderaan's always been near the top of that list. It always gets mentioned every time I've been to a cantina or whatever. It always gets mentioned as one of the places that people would like to see, and now it is going to be one. I think it just got put off because the more recent strongholds tend to be places where they were already working anyway. So, they're doing Manon, the strong, the Flashpoint, and therefore there's also like a Manon area, and because they're working on all those assets anyway, they did a Manon stronghold because it's easier. It's like, okay, well, we're working on Manon anyway. Let's make a Manon stronghold. And the same thing happened with Rishi. The same thing happened with Yavin 4. So with Alderaan, they actually have to go back, and yes, the assets are there, but they're basically like starting that one, from just ground zero, and they have to figure out exactly what they want to do with it and all that sort of stuff. But I'm glad that they're doing it. It's definitely one of the ones that should be in the game, I think, and I think a lot of people are going to be happy with it. So there you go. It'll be interesting to see if like Mekshar or Onderon shows up as a stronghold pretty soon, but something tells me it might be a little while. Beyond, and so that was like right away. After that, I had actually a pretty good time away from the game, actually, because I was visiting family. It was really lovely. Spent a number of days over in Denver visiting my side of the family, and just had a great time there. But because of that, I didn't play as much in the game as I normally do. However, I did get the Jedi Knight. It's a Gwenpool cosplay. She's almost to level 75. She's not quite there. She's about to start Kotfi. And I'm finding it's a really weird feeling because I really like the cosplay. I love how she looks. I think she's actually pretty accurate to what she should look like, and I really enjoy playing her in terms of like the conversations and stuff. But I just don't like playing Jedi Knights. I don't like always having to worry about like how much force I have left, because you only have 12 points. And a lot of the time you just run out, and then I end up spamming the ability that I want to use, and then realizing, oh, okay, now I need to get more force. And so it's not my favorite class to play, definitely, but I love that cosplay, and I'm actually sort of enjoying her, despite the fact that I'm not enjoying the fighting as much, just because I think she's actually pretty interesting, which is kind of a weird feeling. It's also kind of nice because it's sort of helping to confirm that I actually do have a main now. and even though I'm doing some alting and leveling up some other characters, it does make me want to go back to my mains and keep playing them, which is good. The other one I played during this period of time was the Lara Croft cosplay, because I just sort of every day I would do like one chapter of Kotfi and then one chapter of Kotet, and she just finished Kotet, so she's on to like Iokath, and she's been 75 for a while. And I've always been happy with how she looks. I did see Rise of Skywalker twice. I saw it Friday of opening weekend. I saw it again yesterday. So hopefully that'll help us, because that's going to be an important part of this show. We are going to talk about Rise of Skywalker. It's going to be very spoilery, so we will give you plenty of heads up before we do that part of the show. And there's not a whole lot of news this week because clearly the devs, they got the expansion out. They're still working. There's a lot of work still being done, but in terms of like new news, there really isn't any right now. There's very, very little out there. So we have a few more things to do, and then we're gonna just talk about Rise of Skywalker and the Mandalorian, because why not? Because that season is now over, and season 2 will be coming out next year in the fall. So we do have it was we'll get now to the tip of the week. There really isn't a tip of the a week this time. There was one tip sent in by Scott. Unfortunately, I had to disqualify it because it was inaccurate. I think what happened was he sent in a tip about one of the four, the four purple black crystals, like that. If you were, I forget how we got those. If you, I think
subscriber bonus.
It's a subscriber bonus of some sort. Yeah, exactly.
It's free mail for every tune.
Yeah, exactly. When you make a new character, you get a box that opens up and it comes with these 4 crystals. Well, apparently one of them is the War Hero one, can be used at level 1, and he was sending in a tip about that. The problem is you can't actually really use it at level 1, and there's a couple of reasons for it. First of all, I checked in collections, and if you pull one out of collections, it's a level 10 crystal, so you can't do it that way. So then I thought, well, maybe the one that comes in the box itself is level 1, and at least that one would be level 1, and you could use that one. Well, I went to a character that had that box and was less than level 10, and the box can't be opened until you're level 10. So unfortunately, even if the crystal comes out showing it as being available at level 1, it's going to be bound, and you can't open the box at all until level 10. So there's really no way to use this crystal before level 10. So, yeah, unfortunately. But, hey, I appreciate the tip, though. And if you do have a tip, send it to us. You can win a Tonfon or M83 or Droid Pet Code, courtesy of Bioware, and a UtiniCast provided Cartel Market Pack from the latest shipment. And to do that before the next show, OotiniCast@gmail.com, or you can hit us up on Twitter. If you DM us OotiniCast at Twitter, that's a good way to do it too. And that will bring us to the Jedi Mind Trap. Doc?
All right. So before I really discuss the question, I want to just add a caveat to this, that this was not actually intended to be a mind trap, because it's not about SWTOR, but it is about something that I was thinking a lot about after the last episode of OotiniCast. Because if you remember, Chill, we were talking about our anticipation for the Rise of Skywalker the last time we recorded. And I kindly challenged everyone listening to try to have a positive experience watching the film. And one of the things that's been exhausting for me the last 4 years is the knee-jerk reactions to each of the episodic Star Wars films. Because I came out of The Force Awakens having my own opinion, and then instantly, because I was part of Twitter, Twitter was a really big part of my life at that point in time, because I just kind of started trying to build this persona that eventually became Dr. SWTOR. It was 2015. And so it's just all this like really positive, like, we love it, Star Wars is back, thanks J.J. Abrams. And then it was garbage. It was just A New Hope, but with different characters and different pacing.
Right.
And so then you go to the next 2 years, and The Last Jedi is a very different flavor of film. Rian Johnson is a different director, and there's different tastes and preferences and decisions with dialogue and camera placement and all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you come out of that film, you have your own opinion, and instantly it's like, this is garbage. How could you do that? Or that's the best Star Wars film ever. And so we've been living in this for 4 years.
Right.
And so I brought up this idea that it's
and I would
almost
say
like
it's actually also exacerbated by Rogue One and by Solo, because the reactions to that were also different,
right.
And there was also tension between the ones that were chapters and the ones that weren't. So that was sort of a thing as well. But yes, go ahead.
Right. So it's like we have these gates. The movies are the gate, and then it's like there's person A and person B for The Force Awakens. And then there's also person A and person B for The Last Jedi. So essentially, it's like you're developing a personality type, because you're either an AA, an AB, a BB, or a BA. And now we have another gate, right? So if you're watching on Twitch, my hands are up. It's a gate or a field goal. I guess this would be a gate. Anyway, um, so now it's like, well, what are the AAs going to think about the Rise of Skywalker versus the ABs or the BAs or the BBs? And that's something I've been thinking about a lot, and that's the question. So, Chill, the question I asked, which got 85 votes,
Nice.
is knowing what happens in The Rise of Skywalker.
Okay, so
Do
in other words,
you
for people who've seen it.
enjoy retroactively The Last Jedi, ... Four options are more than before, even less, the same, and that's a thumbs up, or the same, and that is an angry face.
Right. Okay. So the
so
same, but I didn't like it. The same, and I did like it. Okay.
Right. So
Interesting.
I realized when I was building the question that unchanged could not actually be
It could
one
mean
thing.
Yeah, it means too much.
Right?
Yeah.
So thank you, emojis, for helping me to express a huge idea in a little picture. So, Chill, before we talk about the percentages and where it looks like the OotiniCast following type of SWTOR players that tend to follow me, what do you think about this question and the whole concept of each movie's a gate, and we walk through it, and over time we become this thing?
Right. And I'll talk more once we get to the spoiler part of the show. Generally speaking, I would say I like it. I like The Last Jedi more than before, knowing what happens in The Rise of Skywalker, for a couple reasons. One is it sort of made me appreciate how much, Rian Johnson was trying new things. JJ has played it pretty safe in both of his movies, I feel, my opinion. But also, even though Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams are, making different choices and so on, J.J. Abrams was able to sort of take what The Last Jedi gave. Some of it was a little neck snapping, but because there were some pretty strong changes from the choices Rian Johnson was making, but he was able to sort of come up with with a wrap up to the entire trilogy and then to the entire nonology as well. So overall, I'd say more than before, and I always was on the side of enjoying The Last Jedi anyway, despite some certain difficulties which we can go into later. So that's how I would have voted. I would have voted more than before.
And that's what I was thinking too, since this is my question. I don't think I really revealed that on Twitter. So if anyone needed to know, I felt that the finality of The Rise of Skywalker clarified some things and showed some movement in some characters, calling back to some of the conceptual points in The Last Jedi, and just reaching a final place. So, for a parallel, in 1980, Han Solo spends the whole film essentially running from the Empire and the bounty on his head from Jabba the Hutt.
Mm-hmm.
And he gets caught, and Boba Fett takes him away, and he's in carbonite. So if I was alive back then, I could have had a knee-jerk reaction of, this is so dumb, what's a Jabba the Hutt? It's just a made-up thing to explain why do we need our hero to be running away from the rebels, just to justify having an extra plot thread. And what does he have to do, since we're really focusing on Luke and training as a Jedi on Dagobah? So dumb. George Lucas, you ruined your franchise.
Right.
Especially
since Jabba is only a reference in the original version of the movie. He wasn't, you never saw the scene where he talked to
He's not
Han.
in that scene in Docking Bay 94.
Yeah.
That's a 1998 thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so then Return of the Jedi lets us see up close and personal. Jabba the Hutt is a Tatooine mobster type character with lots of pull and lots of people who are intimidated by him. You need to take him seriously. And it took our heroes about a third of the film to blow him up. Sorry, spoiler from 1983.
Right.
And so, this is just me kind of working through this process of how does a story having a conclusion help us to further rationalize the middle part, right? The middle part is often the most challenging, because it's the one that gives us our last chance to gasp and inhale and get ready for whatever the final challenge is. And I felt like there are a lot of things in The Last Jedi that I was like, huh, that's bizarre. And then by the sixth viewing of the movie, I was completely fine with it. But then The Rise of Skywalker comes in and says, well, this is what you were seeing. And maybe some of it is the director's retconning and trying to, smooth over some things to tell their story this time around. But if you watch them as films and you accept Star Wars as myth, modern myth, I find this trilogy to be really enjoyable right now. I really do. So I hope that some of those ABs just revert back to being fans. That's my hope. I wish Twitter was less exhausting sometimes. So I think that we win as a fandom by celebrating what we love instead of trying to destroy a film that exists, because that's the film, right? Like, even if you don't like part of it, that's the film. It's locked in. Like, it's
True.
not changing.
Right.
So deciding to wish that it was something else is not really the most mindful approach to living. So that actually turned into a counseling lesson. You're welcome, everybody. I won't charge anyone a copay for that one. So let's move along, Jill.
All right. Well, there really isn't much news, like I was saying before. They did have the PTS up for Alderaan. It was up just a few days. There's going to be another PTS coming in a few weeks, sometime in January. I believe it's going to be, with the aim of having the actual Stronghold out in February. So, yeah. So there's not really too much to talk about there. There is yet more drama, unfortunately, with Tulak Horde server. Tulak Horde's been having so much troubles, and it's sad that it's still having issues of any kind. But in this case, Tulak Horde Mail was not working. They did make it so that it once again started working. This is like right after, this is December 26th. So, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Poor Tulak Horde has gotten like all of the server issues pretty much for the last few months now. So there we go. In general Star Wars news, Rise of Skywalker was #1 worldwide for 2 weekends in a row. However, the first weekend did have lower numbers than anticipated. There was also a steep drop-off into the second week, and it earned $72 million for the second week. And currently it shows 54% for the critics on Rotten Tomatoes and then 86% for viewers. So there's quite a discrepancy there. That happens sometimes with movies. And this is definitely one of them. Like, if you're just a movie critic looking at it as a movie, not a lot of love for it there. But it seems like the actual viewers are generally pretty happy with it. And that's, I think that's probably a good enough reason to just roll right in the Sarlacc Digest, where we go over the issues for 1,000 years, or until we run out of time. And so this is going to be the spoilerific discussion of Episode 9, Rise of Skywalker. So if you haven't seen the movie and you're avoiding spoilers, this is the time to say au revoir, and we'll catch you next show. So... Right. And the interesting thing about those critic scores and the audience scores is they sort of reflect what's going on inside my head too, because on one level I definitely enjoyed it, and yet I can definitely see flaws in the movie as well. So I do feel that sort of tension between like what is working and what isn't, and can I simply enjoy it and let these flaws sort of just kind of wash over me, or is it going to actually affect how I watch the movie and how much I enjoy it and what I think about the movie? So, earlier Floplag in chat was saying, if you go to the film looking with an agenda, you'll find it. If you go in looking for entertainment, you'll find it. And the bottom line, you'll get out of it what you want. It's kind of true. Although, like I said, I wasn't quite able to to go in without expectations or without that either. I would say it is a little bit like the cave on Dagobah. You only whatever you take in there with you is what you're going to get. And I think that's kind of true, because I've seen, since I saw it the first time, I started watching some reviews just to see like what was going on. And there were some people who were just like spending like an entire hour nitpicking, plot threads and or perceived or actual discrepancies and so on. And you can do that. You can definitely do that. Or you can just, and there's other reviews where it's just, sort of like, I enjoyed this. This was a fun movie. I was along for the ride. There was some weird, sometimes they'll say, there was weird choices, and sometimes not. Some people just love it, tip to toe, and that was it. So, what about you, Doc? So I think you have a general idea of how I feel in general about the movie. How do you feel sort of in general about it?
Well, I went into this film with a desire to be happy at the end of it. Because I didn't go into The Last Jedi wanting to be shocked, stunned, worried, concerned. But that movie is very challenging to the preconceived notions of the viewer. I was not expecting that, because The Force Awakens was, here's a new trilogy, Star Wars is back, be happy with Disney. And I left the theater feeling that buzz and that hype. And The Last Jedi was like, oh, you've been living in hype, take this. And I was not ready for the challenge. And like I said, by the fifth or sixth viewing, especially once I bought it on digital and then I got the Blu-ray and I had the ability to just have it on while I'm grading all these papers, because that's basically my life. I realized one day, like, I enjoy this film every time it comes up in my movie rotation.
Last Jedi specifically?
Yeah, like, I love Luke in that film now, especially. So I'm going to give everyone a window into me, because especially it's the end of the decade, like tomorrow's 2020.
Isn't that crazy?
So a lot of social media is like the whole 10-year thing.
Right.
And I'm just like, okay, so 2010 is when I graduated my master's program. And I thought my career for most of my adult life was going to be doing counseling in a behavioral health clinic. And I had not started any of my expertise in gambling addiction or online video games. I had not started my doc program, and I certainly was not on a path necessarily where a person ends up being on a podcast doing a review show about a movie that matters to them. So I started my doc program when SWTOR launched. So I wrote my first paper about MMORPGs, turned it in, and 2 days later created Called on the Razor server, which, if you don't know what that is, it's because 10 people played on it and it got merged with the Shadowlands, which got merged with the Starforge. So what does this have to do with the Rise of Skywalker? Well, in all that learning, I was learning about my craft in a very idealized way. I was Luke on Dagobah, leaving to save his friends because he believed he could, and doing the Jedi thing the right way, not the practical way. The practical way was kill Vader. He's your father. You must be the one to do it. The ideal way is I will not fight. I'm going to do this the right way. I'm not betraying my ideals. And then fast forward to The Last Jedi. Luke is like, this sucks. Throw the lightsaber, burn it all. It's time for the Jedi to end. And I can relate to that a lot, because the real world in my field is a lot different than what you read about in the books. It's a lot different than what my Dagobah was. And by the end of that film, he says several things that he said earlier in the film as a upset, crotchety, disillusioned, just disappointed person. but he says them with hope. Like he does show up and face the First Order with his laser sword. And, he does not fight. And he shows that the Jedi way has some substance to it. He saves his friends, or the people that would be his friends if he was aligned with them and actually got to know them. He saves his sister.
Right.
Right. So I went into this film not wanting to have to repeat that learning process. And so, we get the message from the Emperor. We get Kylo Ren on Mustafar, tracking down Darth Vader's Wayfinder. And I'm pulling in stuff that you don't necessarily get just by watching the film, but that's what it is. He finds the Wayfinder, goes to Exegol, and you see the heart of darkness. Like there's these archetypal images in this film that we may have imagined and suspected that they exist somewhere in this galaxy, but we saw them. Our characters were in them or on them. And it's just really neat to see that play out with Rey and with Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, and Poe Dameron and Finn. And so I had a lot of fun. Like, I want to talk more about it, but that's my opening thing, is to understand where I was at and what I was hoping for. All of that was happening inside me. So if you feel like this movie was fast paced and maybe should have been 3 hours, then sorry, maybe OotiniCast needs to add an hour just to understand me. So Chill, since that's kind of our starting points, what are some of the things that impacted you or you thought were like just really like wow, or things that have provoked some thought in the last 2 weeks or so?
Right. Well, let's see. For me, a lot of it. When I keep thinking about the movies, I sort of see them in terms of like the directors and how that changed things. And the odd thing was there was going to be a third director. There wasn't going to be Ryan, and it wasn't going to be JJ. There was going to be a third director for the third movie, and I think that would have been
Trevorrow from Jurassic World.
Yeah, and yeah. I'm sure he would have tried very well, but I think that would have been a mistake. I think we definitely needed, either Ryan or JJ to like wrap up the trilogy themselves. So I'm glad we got that. It's not just tonal differences, but also like plot and certain other kinds of changes, sort of like swap between the movies. And it's pretty clear that, like, unfortunately, the two directors didn't, and they wrote their movies as well, the writing and directing. So, they used other writers as well, of course, but but they had a hand in formulating their plots and the main lines and so on. It's too bad that they didn't like play together a little bit better, because clearly they both wanted to do certain things and they wanted to say certain things. And unfortunately, there was a little bit of it being at odds like that. So part of me really wishes like that Rian Johnson could have done the third movie, because it would have like, I feel he could have done, an interesting job. He would probably have found just an interesting way to actually wrap up the trilogy, and yet it probably wouldn't have had like these sort of unfortunate sort of retcons or psych, that wasn't really that. That's actually this, which JJ kind of had to do to tell the story the way he was going to tell the story. JJ is kind of a straight ahead director. I mean, he's going to make a pretty straight ahead movie that, follows general action. It follows, typical sort of action movie lines. That's what he's good at, and it's what he does. And so, he clearly set up Snoke to be like the big bad, and then that got sort of taken away, so he had to come up with something to do for the big bad for the third movie. And so he found a way to do that by bringing Palpatine back. And I don't fault him for that. I understand that, in a that clearly Lucas meant Palpatine to be dead forever at that moment at the end of Jedi. But I don't think he was given a whole lot of choice. He had to come up with some sort of something to fight against in the third movie to actually wrap things up. And if you're going to do that, and Snoke's been taken away because he's like, Ryan made sure he was really dead. Like, not only did he cut him in half, but then like he shows like after everything has happened, they do like a close up on his dead face. And it's like, okay,
right.
There's not much you can do. There's not much to do with him at that point. Darth Maul was cut in
half that way, but we didn't see him dead.
Right.
Like that's the extra thing.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to ask you this, Chill. It's a little bit odd to think about, but in the car today, I wondered what would have happened to the film if it was a copy of Snoke on Exegol instead of Palpatine.
Right. Because we see the cloning vats.
Yeah.
And he's clearly in there. I don't know. Partly because Rian Johnson, did, kill him pretty quickly, so we didn't learn a lot about him.
Right. We still don't know much.
Yeah, he's just the hologram in the first movie. In the second movie, we see him, but he's dead pretty soon. And that's about it. So that doesn't really leave him as a really good option. Even if JJ wanted to do that and to sort of bring him back, it would have been hard because you would have had to not only bring him back, but actually establish him as powerful, especially after what happened to him in the second movie. If it's a clone of him, or is it an army of clones of him? I mean, how would you make Snoke powerful given what happened in the second movie? And I don't think that could really happen very easily.
1,000 Star Destroyers buried in the dust.
Exactly.
And you have a Sith Lord on an IV, essentially, but somehow has enough power to lift all of them with the Force. So that's how Chill. But I mean, I just want to say that in our game, we're about to experience this. We killed Valkorion, but Scourge and Kira, if you have made it to that cutscene, am I allowed to talk about this? It's been a few months, right?
It's been almost 3 months.
I mean, they're implying
months,
that
anyway.
Tenebrae or Tenebris or whatever the Sith name of Valkorion was is back in some iteration, like some spiritual plague-like form. So
yeah, maybe. I mean, it could also just be like a galaxy-ending device or a world-ending device. They're not really clear.
Yeah. I suspect
that could be
Valkorion again, like in some way. Yeah, I really do. And then, I mean, 3 years ago, I did not expect to fight Malgus again in any iteration, but look where we are. So Star Wars has this really fun history of recycling dead villains for really important plot points. Like Darth Maul in Clone Wars and Rebels is a very important character to understand. And George Lucas discarded him fast in 1999. So I think we're kind of being conditioned by Lucasfilm to not really worry about death. Like, why is this person here at this part of the story? Oh, don't worry about it. Just imagine something, it'll work, and look at what our heroes are doing against this villain now.
Right.
Dominic Moynihan's character, who's new in The Rise of Skywalker, gives us two very possible options of how's Palpatine back? Sith sorcery, cloning, probably both. Chill.
Right.
I'm gonna admit here, I don't believe that is the Palpatine that Anakin Skywalker threw into the core of the Death Star 2. I believe it is a sacrificial proxy that's designed to get Rey to ascend to the throne, and that he's their most potent archetypal figure for all the people worshiping the Sith way on that planet. And so it's like, well, who do we clone for our most important sacrifice of all time? Our favorite,
Right. The one who took over the galaxy when no one else could.
he did the best at taking over all living things out of all the Sith we've known.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like instead of fighting the Jedi outright, he just decided to have the Jedi's people elect him their leader. That's pretty insidious. Like that's how
Well,
Republic
he was
fall.
well named.
Uh-huh. Yeah, right. So I think that I mean this is just the way that I'm stomaching Palpatine back. If you have a different view as a listener, I welcome that. I would probably love to hear it because I'm not sold on this. You know, we don't have the novel yet. And I'm curious in March or April, whenever we get it, if the book is even going to feel like it needs to go there. You know, because the movie didn't feel like it was beholden to us to explain that.
Mm-hmm.
They just
gave
us those two possibilities.
Right. And I think, you know, given the fact that he was, you know, kind of taking back the trilogy essentially, like, because he clearly wanted to kind of undo some of what Rian Johnson did choice-wise. Considering that he had to do that and he had to do all this within one movie and come up with a big bad and do all that, I think JJ did a pretty remarkable job. You know, like I say, it's not I don't consider it a perfect movie, but I definitely think it was an entertaining movie. Did a pretty good job, you know, given where he had to start and how fast he had to hustle to actually get all this done. You know, he had to come up with a big bad, come up with a way to do it, come up with like a problem that they would have to overcome that was big enough to actually feel like the end of the trilogy and the nonology, and then also solve it, all in one movie. And also wrap up a lot of, you know, sort of character arcs. So we have the end of, we have Kylo Ren's arc, we have Rey's arc, we have Leia's arc, you know, there's a bunch of others as well.
And Leia's arc is tough because Carrie Fisher is not with us.
Right.
And so a lot of the griping, you know, I don't mind conjecture, but I want to just say right now, everyone who's upset with how Leia was handled in the film needs to really have some reality hit them because she's gone.
Yeah.
So you can't gripe about how her face looks in that Return of the Jedi scene, but then say, I don't get why she spent half of her scenes under a white sheet. You know, well, she's gone.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. I was impressed actually with what we got from General Leia.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I thought
there was a surprising amount of it too.
Right. I thought the spiritual connections of the Force and the meaningfulness behind what she did for a person who can't stand in front of that green or blue screen and act, because, you know, she's on the cast list because we're using found footage from deleted scenes. You know, I thought what she did and how she connected with Rey and with Ben Solo and her purpose to the story, not screen time, but her purpose. I loved that. That was one of the things that blew me away about the film.
Right.
You know, they did not have a lot of choices beyond creative storytelling with her. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to jump in and share that. Like, I don't feel like that's a fair gripe about the film, really. You know, she's locked in, you know, with what they can do. And,
right. Yeah,
you know, Maz Kanata, Rose, and everyone on, Agent Kloss, they're just trying to make her dialogue match up with the greater galactic plot.
Right. And I'm certain that, you know, if Carrie Fisher had been alive, the scenes would have been different, of course. But also, like, for instance, I don't think Han Solo would have shown up, you know, in front of Kylo Ren. I think it would have been Leia instead. I think because Carrie Fisher had died, you know, I think they basically went on bended knee to Harrison Ford and said, we need someone with an emotional connection to Kylo. Can you please do one scene? And I'm happy to say, like, I felt Harrison Ford did a really good job. Like, he sort of has a reputation of being a curmudgeon, and but when it comes down to an interesting scene, he can actually act, and he did act, and he put in the emotional work in that scene. He did a good job, and that I felt he did really well there. And it was awkward. It was awkward because he's not a Force ghost. He's sort of this weird memory. It's probably not what they wanted to have. I do think that they would have wanted to have Carrie Fisher and as Leia instead in that scene. But given what they did, it's a little bit like how in Coffee and Kotet, if you're playing a non-Force character and they have to sort of pull you into the and it feels really awkward if you're a smuggler, and somehow you're like the most important character to Valkorian, and it feels a little awkward. It's a little bit like that. It's a little bit like that, but they have to have every class. They didn't have a choice. Just like this, Carrie Fisher's dead. There's no choice there, so we have to come up with something else that will work emotionally, and it did. I felt they did, but it was still a little awkward. But in terms of like how it fit, because he's not a Force ghost, he was never a Force user, but it still worked at least on an emotional level for me, and that's sort of like the important thing. Ultimately.
Well, I actually got a huge dose of what humanity experiences from that scene because I don't know if you've ever had a near-death experience, Chill, but when I was in college, my car spun off the interstate during a storm, and I remember the car spinning, and I remember this calming thought that like this is it, because you're just powerless,
right?
And you think it's over, right? And like you have this feeling like people that matter to you are like in that moment, and that, I mean, the Force is not real. I'm describing my life. Sorry everyone, the Force isn't real. So I mean, Kylo Ren, the Supreme Leader, just got stabbed through several important organs with a lightsaber. And the person who did it scolded him for not being Ben Solo and then used the Force to heal him, which is the exact opposite of the way he's been for 15, 20 years. I don't know, since adolescence. And, in the aftermath of that moment being a relic of failed darkness, his father just replays his most disappointing moment to himself, and he does it differently. He doesn't shove the saber through Han Solo's chest. He chucks the saber like he should have done on Starkiller Base.
Right.
J.J. Abrams had an interview after The Force Awakens where he said that in his mind, that Kylo Ren regrets what he did. And I think
which is actually something that they kept in The Last Jedi, where Snoke says, that action split you to the bone. Yeah, split you to the bone. And so that part actually was kept, which is kind of, and so it's nice that some things, are sort of carried through. One thing I liked about that scene also is there were a couple of interesting callbacks. One is where Harrison Ford says, "I know," and it's clearly a reference to, Leia saying, "I love you," and he says, "I know." And so that's his way of saying, "I love you." But also, before that, and it's a little more subtle in a way, but if you remember from The Force Awakens, Kylo says the same thing here as he said in Force Awakens, where he says, I know what I need to do, but I don't have the strength. I don't know if I have the strength.
I don't know.
And in the first scene, of course, he doesn't know if he has the strength to be dark enough to kill Han Solo. But here, he doesn't know if he has the strength to actually join the light side and actually, undo some of the damage he's done. I mean, he never spells out what he's saying, so you can interpret it differently, but clearly he's talking about, he doesn't know if he has the strength to turn away from this path that he's been on for some time and join a different path. He doesn't know if he has that strength, and he uses the same, almost word for word the same phrase. I'd have to go back to see if it was exactly the same phrase, but it's very, very close. And I thought that was very nicely handled and pretty well written there.
If we want to see symmetry across all three films too, that's how he sort of assures Rey that either I'm going to murder you or I've got this. You know, he says, I know what I have to do, right? So he's always looking at these flashpoint moments with either apprehension or confidence. And, you know, the ones where he switches alignment are the ones where he has that apprehension.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I don't know if I can kill you to get myself closer to Snoke, is then mirrored with, I don't know if I can redeem myself after everything I've done in order to save Rey or conquer Palpatine. Like, who knows exactly what he meant? I mean, I think no matter what he did there, he could have Knights of Ren. They kind of serve no purpose. They just look cool.
Right. The ending to Rise of Skywalker very much feels like a Star Wars movie, because Lucas had set that up in both the original movies and also in the prequels, where the idea is that multiple things are happening at once, and then there are multiple overturnings, and then turnings back, and then turnings again. Like, it can't just, it's not like one simple plan that either goes right or goes wrong. It's always multiple things that happen, and then when things seem to be going better, then they get worse in a different way. Then they have to solve that. While, maybe something's getting better over there, then you solve this other thing, but with the other plot thread, that's going wrong. So, like, it's very much, like Phantom Menace. You have the fight in the castle, you have the fight out on the grounds, and then you have the fight in the sky. And here it was just two, pretty much. You could argue three if you're talking about Kylo and Rey, but whatever. You have the fight with Palpatine, and then you have the fight up above in the skies. And when one's going well, for the good guys, the other is going bad, and then there's always a reversal. There's multiple reversals in both ways.
Right.
That felt very Star Wars to me, and did a pretty good job. And I liked how, especially like with Palpatine, it's like it really felt like they had him kind of like things were going to go like almost wrap up, and then there was like that giant lightning into the sky that sort of started blowing away all the ships they had brought, because they had tons and tons of ships now. So great, there's a nice turning there, and then Palpatine has this uses this massive amount of lightning to destroy them, and it also worked well for me, because while he's doing that, it's basically like you want to kill him to stop him, but if you do that, you're actually helping him. So, like, how do you stop him without actually making it, making it exactly how he wants it to go to go to completion? So,
well, I think the answer to that actually came from Yoda. You have to use the Force for defense, never for attack.
That's right, and that is exactly how it works, and it thematically it does rhyme with and Lucas loved to use that phrase, how things will rhyme in the different movies. In Return of the Jedi, Luke wins by not fighting, and here Rey, well, she's fighting, but she's defending. She basically makes him angry enough so that he's attacking her directly, and then she's able to use a defense to actually destroy him, and which also rhymes with Episode 3, where Mace Windu is fighting Palpatine. Palpatine's shooting lightning, and then Mace Windu's lightsaber is, turning him from a regular-looking human into the sort of the Sith creature that we know as the Emperor.
Right. Also, it's a major burn to me, because she used two sabers, so that means that a Marauder
or a
used
Sentinel.
Saber Reflect.
Yeah, that's right. Use the Saber Reflect.
Saber Reflect.
That's right.
To conquer the most powerful sorcerer.
That's
Although
right.
after
and
all
she took
that
the utility, so it
stuff,
lasts
Jill,
a little longer too.
Right. I mean, after seeing what Palpatine did, I think Lucasfilm needs to nerf sorcerers, because that's just not fair. Palpatine's lucky that it's Lucasfilm and not BioWare in charge. So yeah, I mean, I want to talk about the Force abilities in that final scene. I was really excited to see a Force leech.
Yes,
which,
absolutely.
Which was able to bring that, in my mind, the vessel of Palpatine more into a self-sufficient organism filled with the Force, because he just sucked the life out of the Force dyad of Rey and Kylo Ren. And so we saw that. We saw heals. I thought that was really cool. It seems like they went more with a corruption kind of approach, because Rey described it as putting some of her life into the underground creature,
the serpent, they called it sometimes.
So it's more like a vitality transfer,
right? which is very sorcery more than
instead of a light side heal. It's kind of like they described it, the dark side heal kind of way. So we saw that, and we saw Force Leech, we saw heals, and we saw the most epic saber reflect possible.
That's right.
It did 99k per second.
She probably also used her 99% damage reduction at the same time to.
Yeah, I mean, she died too, so I think she'd have to redo the fight. I don't think she gets the clear on that.
Well, she's 1v8. Yeah, she's 1v1ing on a boss fight, so it's pretty impressive.
Unless it was actually 2v1 and Ben surviving and then like completely transferring his life and Leia's into her counts as a clear.
Right.
For this boss. It's really fun that we're turning Palpatine into a vicious nightmare.
Well, he got to the enrage. He got to his enrage timer too. Clearly,
he did. He clearly did. Oh, that's
he gets
fun.
a new ability that's going to kill you eventually or very quickly. Unless you do something about it.
Yeah, but it got reflected. So
that's
I mean, how many enraged bosses does reflect work on?
Probably not too many.
Not too many. So I think also from a mythological perspective, I think having the Jedi voices, because the beginning of the film, Rey did not want to be alone. She did not want to be the last Jedi, even though Leia's standing right there. She wanted to reconnect, I think, with Luke. I think that she was interested in continuing that relationship, even though he's gone. And I think that her connection with Kylo Ren and completing her Force abilities that way, in that forced artificial way that Snoke locked her into in The Last Jedi, I think that left her in a place where she knew she would have to have a serious fight with Kylo Ren, and whatever else is in the galaxy, the Emperor,
right?
Who she learns is her grandfather.
One thing that this confirmed for me watching this was like, in like fantasy of any kind, whether it's Star Wars kind or other, it's very handy if you can have like two characters, especially if they're at odds, who can sort of be sort of brain melded, because it happened with Harry Potter and Voldemort, and it was very useful for the plot, for the how it resolves and everything else, and it was very useful here too with Rey and with Kylo Ren. And it was actually sort of interesting. I kind of enjoyed how over time, like, this connection is clearly like developed and strengthened to the point where they're able to actually sort of instantly move objects if they're like in close proximity to them. I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was cool. I mean, I'm sure people have other opinions sometimes about that, but like when they're arguing and then he snatches the necklace off of her and then has them try to figure out where it came from culturally, and then they go after him right away because they figured out where it was from. And then the other fight, the Vader helmet shows up and he's like, oh, now I know where you are. I thought, and then of course the lightsaber at the end, and that was all. I thought that was pretty interesting and pretty well handled, because the lightsaber at the end was really kind of necessary. It was for one of those turning points that we were talking about, and but if it hadn't been set up by especially I think the necklace, because the helmet, you could argue, maybe it was just a vision because he doesn't actually touch it, he just sees it, so maybe he could have touched it or maybe not, but you can't tell. But with the necklace, I mean, he snatches it and it's instantly in his hand, even though they were light years away from each other.
Right.
So that makes it kind of clear. Okay, these have certain rules, and then she uses those rules at the end to actually transfer a lightsaber to him, which was pretty cool.
Right, and the first 2 times we see it, that's us learning about how this works. It's good storytelling, but they're in opposition to each other. Right. So it actually shows that Rey is really paying attention as a student of the Force, because she realizes in that moment,
right,
I have two sabers. I can share one.
Right.
And also, it goes back to the Force Awakens. That saber belongs to me. And then the fight with Finn, and then transition into a fight with Rey. And now, since he's come back to the light, it actually did get to belong to him. And that moment gave us a Ben Solo, Han Solo shrug, like on Endor, which I thought was, I'm actually super impressed with everything Adam Driver did as Ben Solo and Kylo Ren in this film. I just, like, my family, we actually came home and marathoned some more Adam Driver films after the first night of The Rise of Skywalker, because we were so high on him as a character.
Nice.
And that was a lot of fun. It was such a nice evening. And I'm just trying to think, are there any other really important thoughts I wanted to share? What did you think about the Jedi whispering their words of support back to a quickly fading Rey during the final battle?
I think emotionally it worked, but I'm sure you could pick that apart too. But because, like, are these Force ghosts? Because, like, some of these people who are talking, we don't know that they were able to ever become Force ghosts, and it was pretty well established that Qui-Gon Jinn was, like, the first one who was ever able to do that. So it's pretty unlikely that, like, for instance, that Mace Windu ever became a Force ghost, because he was kind of in opposition to Qui-Gon Jinn's sort of philosophy of the Force, and he also died, pretty close to the same time, sort of. You know what I mean? Like, not after it had been, thought out and developed by Luke and so forth. So, I mean, you can argue against it. Emotionally, it kind of worked. So for me, that sort of trumps, the fact that maybe it's a little weird to have some of these characters do it. The second time I saw the movie, I did listen to it a little more carefully, to pick out, okay, that was okay, because I knew it was actually coming. It's like, okay, that was Ahsoka, and that was, Qui-Gon Jinn, that was old Obi-Wan, that was new Obi-Wan.
Well, the word Rey is right. Alec Guinness. The rest of the sentence is Ewan McGregor.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just like in The Force Awakens.
Right. Because he happened to use that, sound, that not even the word Rey.
In the word afraid. He says the word afraid in A New Hope.
And it happens to sound right. Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of the Carrie Fisher thing, right? Like, if you want to honor the legacy of Obi-Wan and have both actors represented, you have to use a word that the one who's not with us anymore said. So maybe that's why Rey is Rey instead of Kira, right? Like, that's the original, like, screenplay name that got changed before Episode 7, right? Maybe they changed it because they had this Obi-Wan idea.
What did you think about the kiss?
I mean,
I feel about the same, I think.
I think that it's fine. Okay, I think that Rey probably had a lot of that energy towards the idea of being side by side with Ben Solo.
Right.
And I interpret that she died there. Like she's
Right.
not
She was
alive.
fading out. Yeah.
And Ben transfers so much energy into her that he and Leia both disappear, right?
Right. Right.
Because Leia is laying there keeping him alive,
Mm-hmm.
and then he decides to do this essence transfer corruption force battle res thing, like whatever it is,
Right.
like however the force functions to allow that to
On her
happen.
belly. Yeah. Apparently it's.
Yeah, and so it causes him to fade out too.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, she was dead. She comes back into the land of the living. She sees Ben.
She probably doesn't, right, and she probably doesn't realize that he's about to die. I mean, she actually
Right.
clearly doesn't, because she shows some surprise when he starts to
Right.
go away.
I feel like it's a visceral reaction. So
Yeah.
us sitting in our chairs in those theaters, looking at it and be like, they just validated Raylo. I think if you put yourself in the minds of the characters, like what else would Ray do there?
Right. Because she said earlier in the movie that she wanted to take Ben's hand.
Right.
And specifically, she said specifically Ben's hand. Like she's not interested in taking Kylo Ren's
Right.
hand, but she wanted
Right.
to take Ben's hand. So when she sees that he clearly saved her, because otherwise, why is she alive?
Right. I'm not
I can
dead.
see where. Okay, then I can see where she's kissing him because she's assuming that this could be the start of something. But of course, then he's gone. So,
Or maybe it's
but
just
that's
I'm glad I'm not
still
dead. Thank
from
you.
like an editorial and writing and directorial. It's a bit of a neck snapper. Still, I mean, you have to do some, as an audience member that felt very weird. So
I mean, I don't really know how this works because I've never resurrected anybody, but I like to think that if I resurrected 100 women during the battle for all time between good and evil, that 99 of them would want to kiss me after that res. I mean, that's weird. I don't know if I actually believe that, but I don't have as big a problem with that kiss. I think it works in the storytelling direction. I think it exemplifies what proves to be the final interaction between a living Rey and a living Ben Solo.
right. Yeah, and that's fine. Yeah, I think they could have done the same emotional beat with a hug, and it wouldn't have caused like these weird neck snapping emotional turns that you then have to like really think about to figure out what's going on. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that if J.J. Abrams directed the entire trilogy, it would have been a hug. I think because The Last Jedi is in there, it became a kiss.
Really? What about the change there?
I think
that?
the whole subplot of their minds being bridged in the Force created a more intimate connection between the two of them, and that's Rian Johnson's writing. That connection continued into Episode 9, so it's actually the two of them playing well together. It's validating that subplot. They became a Force dyad because they were, powerful light meets powerful darkness, and they
Right.
complete each other. I think that's the point of the entire Episode 9 is Rey and Ben completed each other. He was able through that to he learned to stop someone from dying, which, if he's trying to finish what Anakin started, and Anakin's rant on Tatooine was, someday I will even learn to stop people from dying. It's a kind of poetic completion of that mission. Turning dark to infiltrate the darkness, slaying Snoke, and being there at the last moment to make sure the hero survives the final encounter, and then stopping her from dying with the Force. I think that Ben became a very interesting echo of Anakin in this story, just because of his circumstance. So
Right.
that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at on the kiss. Is it actually it
Right.
sends that ripple throughout all 9 episodes. It was a very powerful kiss, Jill.
Yeah. And generally speaking, in terms of how about the last scene, I felt that was pretty well handled. It felt okay, it felt good for her to just bury the old lightsabers, and at the homestead where Luke had grown up was, that was totally fine. Where she sees this Force ghost and then takes on the surname of Skywalker, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because that therefore it's the rise of Skywalker. It kind of helps with the title, but also it's just part of her completion. There was a couple of scenes earlier on where like that young creature at that outdoor festival was asking what her last name was, and she said, I don't have a last name, and now she has one because she took it on because she sort of earned it.
Yeah.
I for whatever reason, maybe it was just because it was too late in the movie and my brain wasn't working right, but the first time I saw it, I didn't realize that she had made the new lightsaber. I was like, where did that come from? And then she turned on, it was yellow. I'm okay with that too. I was okay with that the first time too, but I was like, where does that come from? It's really clunky looking. It's like really thick and has really weird ridges and stuff. I didn't realize this was clearly like meant to, she either used her staff to actually make it or kind of like made it, using her staff as sort of as a guide of what it would feel sort of natural in her hand. But it was very clunky looking. The staff. It was like, and it was part of her staff. And it's like, so the second time I got it, it was like, okay, well okay, she made it and she made it to look like her staff. The first time I saw it, I was like, man, that thing's clunky. And which, because it was clunky, I kind of thought, oh, well, it must is that like a really old lightsaber that she found somewhere? You know what I mean? It was it almost looked like how when we play SWTOR, a lot of times they're taking stuff from the movies and stuff and they're making them older. And a lot of times they do that sort of change to it where it feels more old fashioned. It feels like less sleek. And so they sort of chunk things up sometimes. And so that's why I guess that's why I thought, oh, okay, she found that somewhere. I don't know, but yeah. And then I read about it. I was like, oh, okay. Well, of course she made it, and of course it looks like her staff head. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that it didn't become part of her combat style in this episode, because in The Force Awakens, she's fighting with a staff.
Right.
She starts out using a staff style when she goes on the offensive against Luke.
Yes.
Before she trumps him by saying, well, we're not fighting with sticks. I have a saber. And then, so, I mean, she's more adept or more experienced with staff-based fighting, and double-bladed lightsabers, that, I mean, cinematic, so just movie-wise, that's only a Darth Maul thing. We haven't seen anyone else. And then we got that tease of the vision with Dark Rey, who does have a double-bladed saber, and I thought that would be a parallel to her still being a Jedi and maybe having a blue or green one.
Right, or as it turns out, yellow, but at least not red. Yeah.
Yeah, not red, right. And so I wonder if maybe there's like a 15 years from now kind of plan, like Disney Plus Rey will have that yellow saber, which leads to the Force effects and the Hasbro, and it keeps the merchandising efforts going, because it's important to make new weapons, and for some reason to make new colored stormtroopers that also don't really accomplish much in the films. Because we have to sell the toys. And this is not a Rise of Skywalker dig. I have the same feeling about the Executioner troopers from The Last Jedi, right?
Practically every Star Wars, even Rogue One had like the shore troopers, so those were new.
Well, and also like Episode 7 had that character we don't even see in the film from Jakku, and he's the only Black Series figure you could find for like 7 months. in 2016. What was it, Constable Zuvio or whatever? Like it's I see the yellow saber kind of like that. It's another thing we can sell. It also establishes yellow sabers as part of the movie canon.
Right.
It
was in
we
canon
had them
because
in
of
Clone Wars,
because
right?
of Clone Wars, right?
But as far going back to the Tatooine scene, I thought it was really in terms of wanting everything to rhyme and echo and to have this congruence from episode 1, Tatooine is in it. Of course, episode 4, episode 3 ended on Tatooine. Also, important parts of the plot happen in episode 6, and then it just helped Tatooine one last time. It's so heavily connected with Luke Skywalker, and also Anakin. His mom is buried somewhere in that sand too. It's a very fitting place to lay the lightsabers, which are the legacy of the 2 Jedi Skywalkers from the original trilogy, to rest, even though Leia has no connection there really.
Right, no direct connection anyway.
She never. I mean, as far as we know, she probably. I mean, as far as the movies go, she's there. Right. I think there was a book probably where she visited that spot in the legend.
Right. Well, we know that episode 4 starts over Tatooine because
Oh, there we go.
That's
she
why
was in orbit.
She was in orbit, but that's as close as she got apparently.
Getting captured.
Yeah.
What do you think about Ben not being with them? Did you think about that, or is that just something that I have been pondering?
What do you mean not being with them?
Well, it was just Luke and Leia as Force ghosts.
Oh, I see. Those two. Oh, okay. In terms of the Force ghosts that appear.
So, I mean, I figured since Ben disappeared,
right,
and his whole thing is trying to redo Anakin. Redo Darth Vader,
and he should have shown up like at the end of Return of the Jedi. Right. That makes sense actually, and it would have been the redeemed character. The redeemed character shows up.
Well, right. Like Ben did a lot more after turning to the light than Anakin did. Anakin kind of
he did one thing to redeem himself. It was a big thing, but it was one thing.
It was a big thing. He killed the real Emperor, but not the enraged boss version. So
that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but if I think it would have made sense that Ben was there, not for all those reasons, but also, I mean, he is Leia's son as well, so and Leia showed up, so I don't know, maybe.
So I wonder if there's a plan for these characters or this timeline that maybe will answer that in a couple from now, a couple decades in our time, not in Star Wars time. I know they're saying this is the end point, but the bond between Rey and Ben, I'm wondering if that's over. Because she's alive basically because he transferred his entire life into saving her. Kind of like Luke poured his entire life into that deceptive battle.
Right.
And she has a new saber that we haven't seen in action. So I'm wondering if there's a plan that might incorporate more Rey and Ben Solo in the future. But if there's not, I'm actually still very... I'm still happy with the Tatooine part. I thought it was really neat to see the little nooks and crannies of the Lars homestead again.
Right. Did you have a favorite new character in this movie?
Oh, well, new characters. I didn't feel the new characters factored in all that much, actually. Okay, I mean, Babu Frick is a favorite in my household. Just he has a nice energy to him and well executed with the C-3PO scene, and just having someone with that kind of spirit in him and not dying. Small gripe. I wish Kijimi had not been exploded completely. Like I feel like a bombardment that's on par with Darth Malak and Terrace is okay.
Right.
You know, for a cannon on
For
a
a
Star
single
Destroyer.
cannon on a Star Destroyer, right.
Yeah, I just like what.
But having it crack apart like Alderaan.
It took 20 years to build the Death Star, and now like every Star Destroyer can blow up a planet with one blast. Like everyone is on crazy crack adrenals in this story. And I mean, I understand you're telling a story and you're telling it very quickly, and blowing up a planet is a lot more scary than, you know, blowing up a city on a planet.
Right.
I think it cheapens Starkiller Base too.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause, you know, like hollowing out a whole planet and putting that effort into bastardizing Ilum and turning it into this.
Right.
You know, and then like
all
every Star Destroyer can do that.
Yeah, all you need is one big gun, right?
Right. So that's weird. But I don't want people to think that I'm negative toward the film. It's just these are things where it's like, what? Like, you know, the Emperor wasted all those resources, just build one Star Destroyer with a big Freudian penis cannon. Like, it's just like for the symbolism of what Star Destroyers are from a Freudian perspective is awful. So sorry if that's a little bit more adult than what OotiniCast does, but it's, you know, the imagery is crazy when you apply the old school psychology to it. You can edit that out if you want, chill.
You kept it tasteful.
Yeah, it's just.
Yeah, I like the little guy.
Like the Death Star.
Yeah, and that little guy was played by the same actor who played Moaning Myrtle in the Harry Potter movies, which I thought was kind of funny. Yeah, the second time I found out that just before I saw it the second time, it's like you can barely tell. I mean, because they're just she's doing very different things for Moaning Myrtle than she is for that little guy fixing C-3PO or altering C-3PO. But it was pretty good. I like the little Dio droid as well. That was pretty cool.
Yes, voiced by JJ.
Voiced by JJ. That was very sweet. I couldn't tell if it looked like they might have come up with a non-CGI version of that, just like for BB-8. I couldn't quite tell if it was like.
Didn't it go out on stage at Celebration?
Did it? Okay.
I think
if so, I missed that, but yeah. It definitely looked like they were going for that sort of thing where with the BB-8 where they actually could have it, you know, be there in you know, on camera as opposed to a fully CGI. Although they probably use CGI for a couple of shots or something. That's just gonna happen.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I didn't really care about that one character who showed up. It was around the same scene. It was the female character who seems to have some sort of relationship with Poe. And they try to connect up at the end a little bit
Zori
too.
Bliss.
Yeah. I just didn't care about her, like at all. I don't know. Well, maybe it was because of the mask. Mostly, she was wearing a mask most of the time, or maybe it's just whatever. I don't know. I could care less.
That was the attempt to flesh out Poe Dameron's backstory, which was basically let's make him Han Solo.
Kind of, yeah. Because right now he's hot wiring cars and whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Hot wiring.
They just wanted to make him a rounder character instead of a flat character.
Mm-hmm.
We also got Janna on the Forest Moon event, or not Forest Moon. Well, like wherever the Death Star was. I guess
it was a different moon of Endor, actually. Yeah.
Different moon of Endor. Yeah,
it's not the Forest Moon. It's a different moon.
You know, that's actually...
She was actually interesting, and then her connection with Finn, because he didn't know anyone else who had been raised as a stormtrooper and then quit or escaped or whatever. And he let alone that there's like a whole company of them and then they have this connection. I thought that was really cool. And it was from a storytelling point of view, I think that was a very smart thing to do as well. Because it kind of opened his eyes, like, oh, I'm not completely unique in this. There could be other people who, you know, have broken away from the First Order as well. and you could tell
Right.
like there was like that instant connection there because of that.
It also provided the good guys with organic modes of transportation,
Mm-hmm.
which really saved them from just being technologically dwarfed by the Final Order's fleet,
Right.
which is a very similar um,
It definitely rhymes
world
with the Ewoks.
with Return, right, with the Ewoks,
Right.
and
And they even tried.
if
They even tried to like justify it because I mean, it could. You can argue it's just a cool thing to see. Horses on a starship, but then they did the thing where they were gonna like try to like ion cannon the speeders that they were using, but they weren't using speeders. They were using living creatures, so they weren't able to do that.
also a lot of people have strong feelings about the father years from Episode 8. But I think that if you look at the trilogy as a complete story now, I think Episode 8 taking the time to make us care about horses, even though it's a different species
Mm-hmm.
of Star Wars horses, but then the good guys use Star Wars horses as an integral part of their strategy. So again, it's kind of picking up an idea and maximizing on it.
Right.
Maybe that's a stretch, but
Yeah. But
I feel like, when they're like, should we do this? There has to be a rationale for why they would say, yeah, let's do it this way.
mm-hmm. Well,
Um,
I think the other reason for doing it is because Star Wars has always had sort of the same important influences. So you have Kurosawa films, you have World War II films, but you also have westerns as an important influence. I mean,
yeah.
that there's a lot of westerns influence in there, and so bringing the horses along definitely feels like part of that. So yeah. So, did you want to talk about the Mandalorian a little bit, since we now have the full first season in?
Yeah, sure.
Again,
Well,
spoilers. I mean, I don't know why you'd
again,
expect
yeah,
any different, but I'm not gonna. I just don't want to dance around. I'm not. It's not that I'm looking to spoil anything. It's just I don't want to have to dance around it if we're going to talk about it.
yeah. Um, well, I really enjoyed the first season.
Yeah.
I thought the storytelling in that show is top of the line. Looking at the first episode and then the eighth episode and seeing the full trajectory for the characters,
Mm-hmm.
even from IG-11 to the self and the child, the
Right.
asset. I think that a lot of really cool things happened, and I think that it was told in a way that made the characters very easy to connect to.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on the show so far with
Yeah,
season
I've
one
been
of the
really happy
books?
with it. The writing's been good. The plot lines have all been interesting, and I like how there's a fair bit of continuity between them. But there's also like each episode feels pretty separate as well. They did a good job of balancing that out because like each episode has its own like thing that needs to happen, but and yet there's all these other connections that are going on at the same time. So you have, the one where it's like a heist movie and they're going in to do a jailbreak,
Yeah.
but then there's kind of connections as to why it's happening and how it happens and what happens because of it. A lot of really good and interesting choices for acting. So I can't remember the character's name, but the female trooper who was from Alderaan and she's
Cara
joined him.
Dune.
Yeah, okay. And I looked her up, and she was an MMA fighter, but I realized that's not what I knew her from. It turns out she was also the one who played Angel Dust in Deadpool. So she was like the bad guy's like main henchman because she had like super strength. So she's the one who fought Colossus at the end of Deadpool. So it's like,
Oh,
oh, there she is. Pretty cool. It's like, and I knew I recognized her from something, but I couldn't tell what. And it's like, oh, that's what I know her from. And she's doing a really good job too. I like how, other than the stormtroopers who are portrayed as being pretty useless as they are pretty much throughout Star Wars, but like he goes outside to hunt her. This is before they're allies. He's using the heat vision, and the footprints sort of disappear, but she's not there. And he's kind of looking around to figure out why that would be. And it's because she's actually gone up, kind of up, out, out of line of sight of his vision. She kind of swings down on him from up above, and little things like that. And the guy who plays Gus Fring in Breaking Bad, who shows up as who's clearly going to be one of the big bads in the at the very end of this season, but probably ongoing. Well, definitely ongoing, I would say. And he has a moment of sort of intelligence where the Mandalorian has this really big gun and he's starting to shoot everyone. So he, instead of trying to take him out, he instead shoots at the battery pack and kind of blows it up, so that takes out both the weapon and almost kills the Mando. Actually, that's why the droid has to fix him. And I also like that moment where he can't take off his helmet. That's part of his creed, but it turns out he can't take off his helmet in front of any living thing. So the droid was able to heal him. There's some nice, really really nice touches with the writing on that. Baby Yoda, or if you're the child, if you prefer, is super cute, of course, but also seems to have some actually has a bit of personality, like seems to kind of show up at the right time, but can't, and clearly has a lot of force powers, but after using them often is exhausted, can't use them again. Also is very much like untutored. So like he chokes her, he chokes the female trooper even after they're friends, because he thinks that they're fighting, but they're not, and almost presumably could have killed her. A lot of nice touches in this show, and it looks great too. I mean, they did the full Disney, Star Wars, LucasArts treatment, and it's a beautiful show.
The way you described Baby Yoda there, it really hit home in my head how taxing the Force seems to be in the Disney storytelling model of Star Wars. Like there's this repetitive message that the Force is going to kill you if you use it in an unfiltered way. And that's new. I don't remember ever, watching Anakin Skywalker in the Clone Wars, or, trying to defeat Count Dooku on the Invisible Hand, or fighting Obi-Wan and being like, man, I really hope he chills out because I like this character and I don't want him to die. But that's how we lost Luke. That's how we've lost Kylo Ren. That's why Baby Yoda takes so many naps. Like, maybe the message is, don't use the Force, people, if you value your life. But anyway, I agree with everything you said about Mandalorian. I think it's really cool, the very different goals of each episode. We got to see how much we should fear an ATST if we don't have people with plot armor and Ewoks. Like the Mandalorian's like, we can't. We're leaving. We can't take that. It's one ATST.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. Another nice turn that took several episodes to do, where they fight the Mudhorn. That's also the first time we see, that the child has force powers for sure.
Right.
There's indications before that, but this is like the first big time when he uses them. I assume it's he. Maybe it's a she. I don't know, actually.
We don't know.
Have they referred to it as a he?
I don't remember.
Doesn't matter. Anyway, they fight the Mudhorn, but then he refuses the sigil from the other Mandalorians because he's like, this is my quarry. He was an enemy. My enemy helped me fight it. Therefore, I cannot take credit. But then later on, once it's been, now all of a sudden the child is like essentially Mandalorian, like a Mandalorian child, essentially, or very close to it, where they're clearly at least going to be allies until he can find out where the child's people are. And because they're now allies, they can sort of retroactively take credit for teaming up and taking out the Mudhorn, and then he gets the sigil on his armor. Very cool, nice little touch there, I thought as well. So that was another nice little emotional turn. And and really good actors. The Mandalorian was had a kind of small but meaty role in Game of Thrones, and he does a really good job. It's obviously very hard to act when 99% of the time they can't see your face, but he's been doing a really good job. Really,
Well, I thought he was actually really important to Game of Thrones. It was an eye-popping performance.
Hey, da 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 da.
But I think that everyone in The Mandalorian is just exceptionally well cast, and so many people with real, I guess, acting lineage.
Acting chops.
You can identify that these people are great at portraying characters.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to Gus Fring from Breaking Bad, I think it's really neat to see him as a character who is a villain in a thing we can recognize again.
Right.
Because he's been in several things since, but he's usually like a background kind of good aligned character. And
not this time.
Right.
He's going to be front and center, and he's going to be bad.
Well, right. I mean, I have no problem spoiling everything, but like, I don't know. The final scene of The Mandalorian where he exits his downed TIE fighter and just the connective tissue of how he does that, how it connects back to Rebels and Clone Wars and the lore of the Mandalorians,
right? And what a lightsaber is, and
with the dark saber, and that lines him up to be a real serious problem that the Mandalorian probably is not inclined to ignore and run away from forever.
Right. And it also leaves a lot of questions open as to, okay, where did he get this? Does he have force powers, or is he connected to the force in any way, or is this just or is this simply, did he simply get it because he was there with the Mandalorian purge? Is that simply coincidence? A lot of interesting questions that sort of are being raised that will get hopefully answered next fall. Unfortunately, it's like almost a year away before the new episodes. But I'm really looking forward to that. Really enjoyed this first season, and I'd highly recommend it if for some reason you're listening to this, even though we're spoiling everything and haven't decided. Definitely watch it, for goodness sakes.
We said everything was fair game.
It is,
and these things have been out for 10+ days in both instances.
That's right. Oh, and I like how at the end of, I forgot to mention it, but the Rise of Skywalker, one of the last things we hear is some Jawas, and one of them goes, "Ootini!" So
Ootini!
That was awesome.
So we're the only SWTOR podcast that got mentioned in dialogue. So,
all right. Well, I think we should probably call it good there. We've been talking a long time, and I've really had a lot of fun. So any last words about Rise of Skywalker or Mandalorian?
I am all the Sith.
Excellent. All right, then. That's a show. If you'd like to play with us in the Utini Knights Guild on the Republic side of the Satil Shan server, or in our Guild on the Empire side, do a /C join Utini to join the Utini channel. Then let us know you're a fan of the show. You can email questions and comments about the show to utinicast@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter using @utinicast. You can find contact details for all of us on our website, utinicast.com, which includes how to subscribe to us using iTunes, Stitcher, and the rest. We record the show live bi-weekly on Tuesdays, noon Pacific. Go to utinicast.com/live to find out how to join in. Our theme song is Doomsday by Jean-Paul Zogby. And thank you to the chat room, and go see Rise of Skywalker if you haven't.
Oh my gosh, if you haven't, why did you listen to this?
I don't know. We'll see you next show. Thanks, everyone. All right, everyone, we're gonna call it good there. I'll do my editing and all that stuff. I will try to squeeze in a stream later on today. Happy New Year, and have a good night.
See you in 2020.
All right, stopping the stream.